You never owed us anything, kid. Cole Harrison's voice broke. On that Christmas morning, a man who had faced prison, betrayal, and the open road, without flinching, standing in front of a 16-year-old boy who had given them 7 years of handmade gifts and never once asked for a single thing in return. The boy's hands were trembling. His knuckles were scarred. His jacket was 3 sizes too big. And for the first time in his entire life, someone was telling him he didn't owe the world a debt. He didn't know how to believe it. If this story already has your heart, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop your city in the comments below so I can see exactly how far this story has traveled. And stay with me all the way to the end. You will not regret it. Cole Harrison had not slept in 3 days when he finally decided to end the mystery. It wasn't exhaustion that kept him awake. It wasn't the cold December air leaking through the walls of the old garage on the edge of Red Hollow. It wasn't the bikes that needed work, or the paperwork he'd been ignoring for weeks, or the argument he'd had with Denny Marsh about the chapter finances that still hadn't been resolved. It was a wooden eagle, a small, imperfect, extraordinary wooden eagle that someone had left beside the garage door sometime before sunrise on Christmas morning 7 years ago. Wings were uneven. The beak was slightly too long. Whoever carved it had clearly never taken a lesson in their life. And yet, there was something in the grain of the wood, something in the way the feathers had been etched with what must have been a tiny, careful tool that made it look like the person who made it had poured everything they had into that one small object. No note, no name, no explanation. The other guys had laughed it off. Big Denny, who was 6'4" and had a laugh that could rattle windows, held the eagle up and squinted at it and said, "Some kid probably made it in school. Probably a dare." He set it down on the workbench and went back to his coffee. Marker Ellis, the oldest member of the chapter, turned it over in his hands and said nothing. Just set it beside the register and walked away. But Cole had kept it. He didn't know why. He wasn't a sentimental man by any measure. He had not kept his father's watch. He had not kept a single photograph from his first marriage. He kept what was useful and let the rest go. That was the code he'd lived by since he was 19 years old, and the world made it very clear that nobody was going to carry his weight for him. He kept the eagle. He put it on the shelf above his workbench, next to a cracked socket wrench he'd been meaning to replace for 2 years and a coffee mug with a broken handle that he used to hold pens. He looked at it sometimes when he was elbow deep in an engine and needed a moment to think. He didn't talk about it. He didn't explain it. It was just there, and somehow that felt right. The second gift came the following Christmas. A leather bracelet, braided with 3 strands of dark brown leather, and finished with a small metal clasp that looked like it had been hammered flat by hand at the edges. The clasp wasn't perfectly centered. Braiding itself was tight and even and patient, and Cole thought, whoever made this has done it before. Made this practiced again. No name, no note. This time, a few of the guys paid attention. "Somebody's watching us," said a member named Royce, who was built like a refrigerator and had the instincts of a man who'd spent 20 years making sure nobody caught him off guard. He wasn't smiling when he said it. He stood in the doorway of the garage and looked up and down the empty street, and his jaw was tight. Cole looked at the bracelet. "They left a gift, Royce. Not a bullet." "Same difference sometimes," Royce said. He was. "Somebody who watches you long enough figures out where you're vulnerable." Cole looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked back at the bracelet. He said, "They just wanted to say thank you." Made a sound in his throat that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite dismissal, and he went back inside. Cole kept the bracelet too. He didn't wear it. He put it on the shelf next to the eagle. And now, when he looked at those 2 objects side by side, he felt something he couldn't name sitting in the center of his chest. Something quiet, something he hadn't felt since he was a boy himself, a very long time ago. The third year, a small motorcycle model appeared, hand-carved, about 8 inches long, with wheels that actually turned and handlebars made from bent wire. It was the most technically complicated of the 3 gifts, and Cole stood in the cold December air holding it in both hands for a full minute before he walked back inside. "Same person," he said to nobody in particular. Denny looked up from his phone. "How do you know?" "The wood," Cole said. "Same grain, same tools, same hands." Marker Ellis came over and looked at the motorcycle model without touching it. A quiet man, Marker, the kind of quiet that came from watching too much and saying too little for too many decades. He had crow's feet around his eyes and a scar along his jawline that he never explained. He looked at the model for a long time. Getting better, Marker said finally. Looked at him. What? Whoever's making these. Marker pointed at the wheels. This year, the eagle was rough. Last year, that bracelet cleaner. This year, look at these wheels. Somebody's been practicing. Every year, they get better. He stepped back. That's not a kid doing a dare. That's somebody working at something. The garage was quiet for a moment. Thanking us, Cole said. Marker looked at him with those steady, unreadable eyes. That's what it looks like. And something in Cole's chest shifted right then. Something heavy and old moved just slightly out of place, like a stone rolled half an inch to one side, and he felt the cold air a little more sharply after that. Felt it in a way he hadn't expected. He thought about who, in Red Hollow, would spend a year practicing woodworking just to give the Hells Angels a Christmas gift. He couldn't figure it out. And for a man like Cole Harrison, a man who had built his entire reputation on figuring people out, on reading the room and understanding the angle and knowing who was who before they even opened their mouth, that was deeply unsettling. He asked around carefully in the way he did everything carefully. Did you see anyone near the garage Christmas morning? Anybody acting strange lately? Anybody watching the place? Nobody had seen anything. Whoever left the gifts was a ghost. The fourth year, he almost caught them. He'd left his phone in the garage on Christmas Eve, or at least that was the reason he gave Denny when he said he had to swing by the place at 5 in the morning. The truth was he'd set an alarm, driven over in the dark, and sat in his truck half a block down the street where he could see the garage door without being seen himself. He waited an hour. He saw nothing. When he walked up to the door at 6:15, stomach tight with a frustration he couldn't quite justify, there was another gift waiting for him. A small carved figure of a man on a motorcycle, bent forward over the handlebars, jacket open, wind implied in the tilt of the body. 5 inches tall. It was the most detailed thing yet. Cole stood there in the gray Christmas morning light, holding this tiny figure, and he said out loud to no one, "Who are you?" No answer. Just the sound of the wind down the empty street. He drove home that morning and sat in his kitchen and drank cold coffee and thought for a long time. He thought about the kind of person who gives without wanting to be known. In his experience, and his experience was wide, and sometimes ugly people who gave anonymously were either ashamed or they were afraid. And the gifts themselves told him this wasn't shame. Was too careful, too deliberate, too personal, and was proud of what they made, even if they never showed it. Afraid of what? Of them? Of the Hells Angels? That thought sat uncomfortably in Cole's chest for the rest of the day. The 5th and 6th years passed with more gifts, each one more refined than the last, and Cole kept them all on the shelf above his workbench. The guys had stopped laughing about it by the 4th year. By the 5th, it had become a tradition, something they looked forward to and didn't talk about too much because putting words to it seemed like it would break the spell. Ever gonna find out who it is? Denny asked once in the summer of the 6th year. He was looking at the collection on the shelf, 6 gifts now, lined up in order, a record of someone's growing skill. Yeah, Cole said. When? When I figure out how to do it without scaring them off. Denny considered that. You think they'd run? I think, Cole said slowly, they've been running their whole life. And this, he nodded at the shelf. This is the only time they slow down. And he was quiet for a moment. Then, that's a hell of a thing, Cole. Cole said, it is. The 7th year, Cole made his decision. He didn't tell anyone what he was planning. He didn't set an alarm or drive past the block. On Christmas Eve, around he simply locked up the garage, inside, through the back, and settled into the old wooden chair in the corner, the one they used when someone needed to stay late and watch the place, and he waited. He didn't turn on a light. He kept his phone face down in his pocket. He sat in the dark and he breathed and he waited. The garage was cold, ached. Around 2 in the morning, he shifted in the chair and felt his back complain loudly, and he told his back to be quiet. Around 3:15, he heard the wind pick up outside and thought about his warm bed and dismissed the thought. Around 4, he started to wonder if this was the year it didn't happen. And then at 4:30 in the morning, he heard footsteps, careful footsteps, light ones, the kind made by someone who had learned, through long practice, how to move without being noticed. Cole did not move. He heard the footsteps stop just outside the garage door. He heard a soft sound, something being set down on the ground, gently, carefully. He heard the sound of someone breathing, Quick, quiet breaths, the kind a person takes when they're nervous, but trying not to show it. And then silence. The footsteps began to move away. Cole stood up. He crossed the garage and 5 steps, reached the door and pushed it open. Figure outside was not what he expected. Cole Harrison had been imagining for 7 years what kind of person would do this. He'd pictured an older man, maybe a veteran, someone who'd been through something and found a quiet way to express gratitude. He'd pictured occasionally a woman, someone whose family had been helped by the charity rides the chapter ran, who baked and knitted and carved and left gifts as a way of saying what she couldn't say out loud. He'd pictured once a fellow biker from another chapter, someone paying silent respect. He had not pictured a boy, a skinny 16-year-old with blonde hair that stuck up at odd angles and an oversized jacket that was at least 2 sizes too big for him. Now, gloves on hands that Cole could see, even in the dark, were scarred from long hours of detailed work. A boy who looked like he'd been awake all night. A boy who looked like he'd been awake for years. I saw Cole at exactly the same moment, and he ran. Cole took 2 steps after him, then stopped. He didn't chase. He stood in the cold December air and watched the boy disappear around the corner at the end of the block, and he felt something move in his chest, that stone again, rolling further out of place, and he looked down at what the boy had left. Figure of a guardian angel, imperfect wings, full hands, hours of work visible in every line, and beside it a small folded piece of paper. Cole crouched down and picked up both. He unfolded the paper in the gray dawn light and read the words, written there in careful, deliberate handwriting, the handwriting of someone who had taught themselves to write neatly because nobody else was going to teach them. Thank you for protecting people who never thanked you. Cole stood up slowly. He looked down the empty street where the boy had vanished. He looked at the angel in his hand, at those imperfect wings, at the hours of care carved into 4 inches of wood. He looked back at the note. He read it again. And Cole Harrison, who had not cried since he was 11 years old, who had built an entire identity around being the man who didn't flinch, who had sat across tables from men who wanted to break him and never given them the satisfaction of seeing anything on his face. Cole Harrison stood alone on the sidewalk at 4:30 in the morning on Christmas Day, holding a wooden angel carved by a boy who didn't even know if anyone would ever read his note, and he felt something crack open in the center of his chest. He went back inside. He set the angel on the shelf at the end of the line of 7 years of gifts. He sat back down in the old chair, and he stayed there until the sun came up, thinking about who that boy was and why he had run, and what it meant that someone had been carrying this particular gratitude for so many years without ever letting it go. When Denny arrived at 9 o'clock that morning, Cole was still in the chair. Denny stopped in the doorway, looked at Cole, looked at the shelf and the new addition, the angel, and the note that Cole had laid carefully on the workbench beneath it. He walked over and read the note. The garage was very quiet. Ernie said, "I know," Cole said. "You saw them?" Said, 16 maybe. Ran when he saw me. Denny picked up the angel, held it in his big hands, turning it over. The way you'd hold something you were afraid of breaking. And the fact that Denny was being careful, Denny, who broke things without noticing, said everything about how that carved piece of wood was hitting him. Thank you for protecting people who never thanked you. Denny read aloud, from memory, his voice different from his usual voice. Angatur, what does that mean? What did we protect him from? I don't know yet, Cole said, but I'm going to find out. Set the angel down. And then what? Cole looked at him. Then we figure out why he's still afraid, and we fix it. For a moment. Then he nodded once. The kind of nod that meant this was now a chapter matter. The kind of nod that meant it was going to happen. Christmas, Denny said. Yeah, Cole said. He looked at the shelf. All 7 gifts. 7 years of gratitude from a boy who'd been running in the dark. Christmas. The other guys arrived through the morning marker. Royce, a younger member named Stiles, who'd been with them 3 years and was still learning when to speak and when to listen. They all read the note. They all looked at the angel. Nobody made a joke. Nobody said anything tough or dismissive or casual, the way men sometimes do when something lands too close to a feeling they don't know what to do with. Stood in front of the shelf for a long time. He had his arms crossed, and his eyes were moving across all 7 gifts, in order the way you'd read a sentence in a language you were just beginning to understand. 7 years, he said. 7, Cole confirmed. That means he started when he was 9. Raj went very quiet at that. 9 years old. A 9-year-old child, alone on Christmas morning before sunrise, leaving a handmade gift outside a Hells Angels garage because he wanted to say thank you to people who terrified most of the town just by existing. What 9-year-old does that? Stiles asked. He wasn't being rhetorical. He genuinely needed to know. One who's got nobody else, Marker said. That was the thing none of them wanted to say out loud. That was the thing sitting in the room with them now. Heavy and specific and unavoidable. A child who had nobody else. A child who decided at 9 years old that the men most people avoided looking at directly were the closest thing he had to proof that good people still existed, and then spent 7 years working at a piece of wood every December as his way of honoring that belief. Cole said, today, nobody argued. In a town like Red Hollow, population 4,000, the kind of small American place where everyone knows 3 things about everyone and pretends to know more, finding a blonde 16-year-old who carved wood was not going to take long. Not for men who had been part of this community, on its edges and through its back streets, for going on 20 years. Made some calls. Stiles drove through the neighborhoods, slowly, looking for nothing in particular and everything at once. Went to the diner on 4th Street, where he'd been eating breakfast every Saturday, Saftanamtari for 15 years, and asked the waitress, whose name was Gail, if she knew a young woodworker in town. Put down her coffee pot. 16 blonde? Quiet kid? Marker's eyes sharpened. That's him. That's Noah Bennett, Gail said. Lives out on the Wallace property. You know Richard Wallace? Marker knew Richard Wallace, the way you know a smell, not fondly. What do you know about the boy? Marker asked. Gail looked over her shoulder, a reflexive check that nobody was listening, and then she lowered her voice. I know he comes in here sometimes after school and orders 1 coffee and nurses it for 2 hours, she said. I know I've never seen him eat a full meal. I know he always pays exact change, never a penny more, like he's counted it 4 times before he comes in. She paused. The furniture in Richard Wallace's house changes about twice a year, and it's always beautiful. And I've never once seen Richard Wallace in a workshop. Sat with that for a moment. How long has the boy been with Wallace? 6 years, Gail said, since he was 10. Marker put down his coffee cup. He left a $20 bill on the counter, twice the cost of the coffee, and he walked out. He called Cole from the parking lot. His name is Noah Bennett, Marker said. He's 16. He's been living with a man named Richard Wallace for 6 years. Pause on Cole's end. Richard Wallace. Yeah. Another pause. Marker, Cole said, get everyone together. We need to talk. The full story of Noah Bennett came together in pieces, the way truth always does, not in a single revelation, but in the accumulation of small facts that each seem manageable alone until you lay them side by side, and suddenly you can't look away from what they spell. They learned that Noah had no living parents. They learned that he had cycled through 4 foster placements before Richard Wallace, each one ending for reasons that were never fully explained in the paperwork. They learned that he was a quiet student, never in trouble, never demanding attention, the kind of kid that teachers remember vaguely as being good, but can't pick out of a photograph a year later because he'd been so careful to take up as little space as possible. That Richard Wallace had a furniture business, not a workshop, not a showroom, just a website and a truck and a phone number. A business that had started generating real income about 6 years ago, around the time Noah arrived. And they learned something else from a woman in the school office who had 2 beers at the tavern on Route 12, sometimes on Friday nights, and didn't always keep everything she knew exactly where it should stay. Noah Bennett had won an award at school last spring, a regional woodworking competition. He'd made a rocking chair that had the judges talking for 20 minutes before they agreed it was the best piece they'd seen in 12 years of running the competition. Richard Wallace had been at the award ceremony. He'd accepted the trophy. Cole hung up the phone and sat in the garage for a very long time. He looked at the shelf. 7 gifts. 7 years of Noah Bennett making something beautiful with his hands and leaving it in the dark without his name on it because he'd learned early that his name on things didn't help him. Cole reached out and picked up the wooden angel. He held it the way Denny had held it, carefully, like something that could break. We protected him once, Cole said, to nobody, to the empty garage, to the small carved figure in his hands. Without even knowing it, he set the angel down. He had a lot of work to do. Cole Harrison did not sleep that Christmas night. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about a 9-year-old boy alone on a highway and the way a Hell's Angels charity ride had passed through the dark without knowing what it was scaring away. He thought about 7 years of handmade gifts. He thought about hands covered in calluses and small cuts from hours of careful work. He thought about a trophy that a man named Richard Wallace had accepted with someone else's name on it. He got up at 5 in the morning and drove to the garage. Marker was already there. That was the thing about Marker Ellis that most people didn't understand. The man had a sixth sense for when something was about to require serious thought, and he always arrived first. He was sitting in the old wooden chair with a paper cup of gas station coffee, and his eyes were doing that thing they did when he was working through something complicated, moving slightly, even though the rest of his face was completely still. "You didn't sleep either," Cole said. "It wasn't a question," Marker said. Cole pulled up the other chair and sat. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The garage held the particular quiet of early morning in winter, the kind of silence that has weight to it. "We need to be careful how we approach this," Marker said finally. "I know. If we go at Wallace the wrong way, Noah pays for it. He gets moved. He loses the only place he knows." Marker turned the coffee cup in his hands. "And there's another thing." "What?" "He's 16. He ran from you last night." Marker looked at him steadily. "He's been leaving those gifts for 7 years and never once wanted to be seen. You understand what that means? The boy has been surviving by being invisible. We walk up to his door, knock and say, 'We know who he is and what Wallace is doing to him.' That boy is going to shut down completely. He'll deny everything." Cole knew Marker was right. That was the most frustrating part, knowing he was right. "So what do? We learn," Marker said. "Before we move, we learn everything there is to know about Noah Bennett and Richard Wallace. We build a picture so complete that nobody can look at it and look away." Cole nodded slowly. Then he said the thing that had been sitting in his chest since 4:30 that morning. "Marker, when he started leaving us gifts, he was 9 years old. And he'd already decided that we were the good guys." He paused. "What kind of 9-year-old is already that alone?" Marker was quiet for a long moment. "The kind that's been alone long enough to recognize safety when he sees it. Even from a distance," he said. "Even if the thing he thinks is safe looks like us." That landed hard. Cole let it sit. The others arrived through the morning. Denny came in loud and then went quiet when he read the room. Came in with 3 bags of food from the diner and set them on the workbench without comment. Stiles arrived last, still young enough that he wasn't sure how to position himself in a conversation this heavy, and he stood near the door and listened. Cole told them what he and Marker had decided. Learn first. Move second. No confrontations, no visits to the Wallace property. Yet. "How long?" Denny asked. "As long as it takes to do it right," Cole said. Denny didn't like that answer. Cole could see it in his jaw. Denny trusted Cole's judgment the way he trusted the road under his tires, not because he couldn't imagine it being wrong, but because he'd seen it be right enough times that doubt felt irresponsible. He nodded. He ate his breakfast. He didn't say anything else. What followed was 2 weeks of careful, patient investigation, the kind that Cole had learned over decades of navigating situations where the official channels either moved too slow or not at all. He didn't break any laws. He didn't threaten anyone. He asked questions of people who were already willing to talk, and he listened with the particular attention of a man who understood that the truth always lives in the details that people think are too small to mention. He talked to the school secretary again, more formally this time, and learned that Noah's attendance was perfect, not good, not above average, perfect, but single absence in 3 years. "That's unusual," the secretary said. "A woman named Helen with reading glasses on a beaded chain. Kids miss school, even the good ones. But Noah hasn't missed a day." "What does that tell you?" Cole asked. Helen took her glasses off, put them back on. "It tells me school is the safest place he has," she said quietly, "and he knows it. He talked to the woodworking teacher at the high school, a man named Frank Delaney, who had been teaching shop class for 22 years and had the forearms of someone who'd spent those years actually working with tools. Delaney didn't need much prompting. "Noah Bennett," he said, and his voice shifted the way voices shift when you mention someone you've thought about more than you've let on. "Sit down." Cole sat. "That kid came into my class 2 years ago," Delaney said. "I give everyone a piece of softwood and a basic chisel exercise just to see where they're starting from. Take off a corner, follow the grain, don't stab yourself." He paused. Noah looked at it for about 30 seconds, picked up the chisel, and produced something that it takes most kids 2 semesters to get close to. Already knew how, Cole said. He already knew how. Delaney confirmed. And not just the basics. He knew technique. He knew grain patterns. He knew tool selection. He understood load and stress and the way wood wants to move. That's not something a 16-year-old just picks up casually. Delaney leaned forward. That's thousands of hours. That's years of serious work. Cole thought about the shelf in the garage. The wooden eagle, rough but deliberate. The motorcycle model, each one more refined than the last. Did you ask him about it? I asked him where he learned, Delaney said. He told me he taught himself. I pushed a little, asked if he had a mentor, someone who worked with him. He shut down immediately, just went back to what he was doing. Delaney's expression tightened. I've been teaching long enough to know when a kid has been told, explicitly or otherwise, that certain questions are dangerous. That was one of those moments. The competition last spring, Cole said. Rocking chair. Delaney's face did something complicated. That chair, he said, was the best piece of work I have seen in 22 years of teaching woodworking. And I'm not speaking loosely. I've had talented students. Noah isn't talented, Mr. Harrison. Noah is gifted in a way that comes around once in a generation if you're lucky. He stopped. Richard Wallace accepted that trophy. I know. Noah didn't say anything about it. To me, not to anyone, as far as I know. He just sat in the audience and watched a man walk up to the podium and take credit for something Noah built with his own 2 hands. Delaney's voice had gone flat in a way that was more expressive than anger. And the look on that boy's face, I've been thinking about it since April. He didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a person who has already accepted that this is how things work for them. Cole drove back to the garage with Delaney's words sitting in his chest like something with edges. He sat in the parking lot and didn't get out of the truck for a few minutes. He thought about a boy watching another man accept a trophy for his work and not even flinching because he'd already learned not to expect anything different. He thought about how much practice that kind of acceptance takes. How many times something has to be taken from you before you stop being surprised by the taking. He called Marker. We need to talk about the furniture business, Cole said. Wallace's website, his clients, his pricing. Already on it, Marker said. Meet me at the garage. Had a contact, the kind of contact that didn't have a job title, but could find information that technically existed somewhere in the public record if you knew exactly where to look and had the patience to follow the chain. 8 hours, they had a clearer picture of Richard Wallace's furniture business than Wallace probably had himself. The numbers told a story. Wallace had been selling custom handcrafted furniture for 6 years. Prices were not cheap. They were the prices of genuine craftsmanship, the kind that serious buyers paid for serious work. He sold to interior designers in the city, to families renovating old homes, to a hotel chain that had done 3 orders in the past 2 years. His annual revenue in the most recent year was just over $90,000. He had no workshop. He had no tools registered to his address. He had no woodworking background, not in any documentation, not in any record, not in any conversation anyone in Red Hollow could recall. He's got a shed on the property, Roy said. Big one. Out back, away from the main house. Noah's workshop, Cole said. Has to be. Cole looked at the numbers again. $90,000. A 16-year-old boy with scarred hands and worn-out gloves, and a jacket 3 sizes too big for him. What does Noah get? Cole asked. Nobody answered immediately, because the answer was too ugly to say out loud without taking a breath first. We don't know exactly, Marker said finally, but based on what we know about Wallace, and based on the way Noah comes into the diner and nurses a single coffee for 2 hours because he can't afford a second one, he stopped. Not much, if anything. The garage was very quiet. Stood up. Okay, he said, and his voice had the particular flatness of a very large man deciding not to do the physical thing he most wanted to do. So what do? We get evidence, Cole said. Real evidence. The kind that doesn't go away when someone lies. Who had been quiet for most of the past 2 weeks, said something from his spot near the door that made everyone in the room stop and look at him. Kept record, Stiles said. Cole turned. What? Stiles straightened slightly. I was at the diner yesterday. Gail, the waitress, she said Noah came in 2 days ago. She gave him a coffee and a piece of pie, said it was on the house, holiday special. He didn't want to take it. Stiles paused. She said when he reached into his jacket to pay anyway, she saw a notebook. Not a school notebook, smaller, worn. He put it away fast, like he didn't want her to see it. It was very still. A worn notebook, Cole said slowly, that he didn't want anyone to see, that he's been carrying around in his jacket, Marker added. Cole looked at the wooden angel on the shelf. He thought about a boy who left gifts without his name on them, a boy who sat in the audience while someone else accepted his trophy, a boy who had survived 6 years with Richard Wallace by being invisible, by taking up no space, by never complaining, by never asking for anything, but who had apparently been writing things down. He's been documenting it, Cole said. He kept records because some part of him knew that someday he might need them. Raj held that realization for a long moment. That kid, Denny said, and his voice was rough in a way he clearly hadn't intended. That kid has been building his own case against Wallace for years, without telling anyone, just in case. He stopped. He's 16 years old. He's been alone since he was 9, Marker said. Probably longer. Cole looked around at the faces of the men in his chapter, who had built their entire identities around being unbothered, unaffected, too weathered to be moved by much. Denny, who was red in the face and working hard to keep his hands relaxed, who had his arms crossed and his jaw so tight it looked like it hurt, who had gone very still in the way that meant he was feeling something he hadn't allocated space for. Stiles, who was 26 years old and looked, in this moment, very young. Cole felt the weight of all of it, the 7 years of gifts, shop, in the shed, the $90,000 rocking chair and the trophy and the notebook in the jacket, and he made a decision that he would not revisit or second guess. Not doing this quietly anymore, Cole said. We're going to help Noah, and we're going to do it in a way that Wallace can't come back from. Nobody asked him what he meant. They already knew. Because this was the thing about the men in that garage, the thing the town of Red Hollow had never entirely understood about them. They were not complicated people. They were not subtle or calculating or political. When they decided something was right, they moved toward it. When they decided something was wrong, they moved against it. Between those two positions was the shortest possible line. They had decided. The question now was how to reach Noah before they moved, because moving without him was the same as moving against him. Cole understood this in the bone-deep way. He understood everything important not from being told, but from having lived through the version where nobody asked him what he needed and just decided on his behalf. He wasn't going to do that to Noah. He needed to talk to the boy first, that Noah was now running from them. Cole had seen his face for maybe 3 seconds in the dark on Christmas morning before the boy took off. And in those 3 seconds, he'd seen something that he recognized from memory, the face of a person who has been caught and who is already calculating the cost of being caught and who has learned that the cost is always high. He's not going to come to us, Cole said. No, Marker agreed. So we go to the one place he feels safe, Cole said. Not the Wallace property, not anywhere he associates with his regular life. We go to where he's himself. Marker looked at him. Delaney's class. Delaney's class, Cole confirmed. He called Frank Delaney that evening, explained carefully and honestly what he knew and what he didn't. There was a long pause on Delaney's end. If I let you come to my class, Delaney said, you're going to tell me you won't upset him. I'm going to tell you I'll do everything possible not to, Cole said. I can't promise how he reacts to seeing me. He knows I saw him. Another pause. What do you want from him? I want him to know he has options, Cole said. That's all. I want him to know that there are people who know what's happening and who are not going to look the other way. Delaney took a long breath. Wednesday, he said. Last period. I'll tell him I have a guest speaker. Somebody talking about trades and small business. He paused. Which isn't entirely a lie. No, Cole said. It's not. It became cold and gray, and Cole drove to the school with Marker in the passenger seat, and neither of them said much on the way. Cole wore a clean shirt and left his jacket in the truck, which Marker noticed but didn't comment on. Delaney met them at the shop class door and walked them inside. 5 students at various workbenches, and at the back bench, his head down, with a small plane on a piece of light oak, was Noah Bennett. Cole recognized him immediately. Even with the blonde hair less messy than it had been on Christmas morning, even in the ordinary light of the classroom, even without the oversized jacket, he recognized the shape of him, the particular economy of his movements, the way he handled the tool with a precision that looked automatic, like breathing. He looked up when they walked in. He saw Cole. Every muscle in his body went rigid at the exact same moment. Cole watched the boy's eyes do the calculation, the same calculation he'd seen in hundreds of faces over the years. The fast, terrible arithmetic of a person figuring out how bad this is and how quickly they need to move. He watched Noah's weight shift, almost imperceptibly, toward the edge of the bench, toward the door on the far side of the room. Raised one hand open, palm forward, not a wave. Just stops, wait. Noah froze. They looked at each other across the length of the workshop for a moment that felt much longer than it was. And then Cole said, quietly enough that it was just for Noah and didn't fill the room, "I'm not here to make trouble for you. I just want to talk." Noah's jaw tightened. His hands were still on the plane and the wood. His knuckles, Cole noticed, were white. "You don't have to run," Cole said. "I'm going to sit down over here, and you can keep working, and we can talk or not talk. To you." He pulled a stool back from an empty bench and sat down. He folded his hands. He waited. Marker had positioned himself near the door, not blocking it, just standing near it, giving the boy a clear sense of where the adults in the room were. The other students had registered that something was happening, but weren't sure what, and they went back to their work with the careful, studied disinterest of teenagers who have learned that looking too interested in adult conversations is its own kind of danger. The silence stretched. Noah did not run. He looked back down at the wood. He moved the plane once, twice, and Cole could see it was mechanical, that his hands were working on memory while his brain was somewhere else entirely. After maybe 45 seconds, without looking up, Noah said, "How did you find out my name?" His voice was lower than Cole had expected, more even. Was the voice of someone who had practiced staying level when they were terrified. "People in this town talk," Cole said. "Good people who've noticed things about you and didn't know what to do about it." "What things?" "That you work very hard," Cole said. "That you're very talented, and that you never seem to keep anything you make." The plane stopped moving. Noah didn't look up, but his whole body had changed. A subtle closing down, like something pulling back from an edge. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Cole said. "Silence. The gifts." Cole said. "You left at the garage." Noah was very still. "I kept all of them," Cole said. "Every single one. On a shelf above my workbench. 7 of them in order. I look at them every day." He paused. "The angel is at the end. I put it there Christmas morning after you left." Something happened in Noah's face that he clearly didn't intend. A small, involuntary movement around his eyes. Not quite pain. Not quite relief. Something that lived between the two and didn't have a simple name. "Why did you keep them?" Noah asked. His voice was still careful, still level, but there was something under it now. "Because they mattered," Cole said. "Someone worked very hard on them and left them for us and never asked for anything back. And that's not something you set aside." Finally looked up. He met Cole's eyes for the first time in full light. He was 16, up close, with light on his face. He looked both older and younger than 16, older in his eyes, which had the quality of eyes that had seen too much too young, and younger in the way he held his jaw slightly forward, the unconscious brace of a kid who has learned to take hits and is always slightly braced for the next one. "I didn't do it to get anything," Noah said. "If that's what you're thinking." "I know," Cole said. "That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you." "Then what do you want?" Cole thought about how to say this. He turned it over for days, and out to words. Percent. The right approach, right angle, copy. And then he decided, because he was fundamentally not a man who dressed things up, to just say the true thing. "I want to know if you're okay," Cole said. "Because from what I can see, you might not be. And if you're not, I want you to know that you don't have to be alone in that." Noah looked at him for a long time, his old eyes in that young face, calculating, measuring through every possible version of what this meant and what it cost and what the trap was. Because there had always been a trap. In Noah Bennett's experience, kindness from a stranger had a price attached to it that you didn't find out until it was too late. "Why would you care?" Noah asked. Not aggressive. Genuinely needing to know. "Because you cared about us," Cole said. "For 7 years, you cared enough to make something and leave it in the dark for us to find. Nobody asked you to. Nobody knew you were doing it. You just did it." He looked at the boy steadily. "You don't get to spend 7 years caring about people and then act surprised when one of them shows up wanting to return the favor." Something shifted in Noah's expression. Not trust, not yet. The possibility of trust. Somewhere behind his eyes, opening one careful degree. "I heard you that morning," Noah said. "When I ran, You said, hey, and then you stopped. I stopped, Cole confirmed. Why? Because chasing you would have been the wrong thing to do. Noah processed that. He looked back down at the wood under his hands. He moved the plane one more time, slowly, feeling the grain. He said finally, you read it, I read it. And I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly, Cole said. A beat. Then Noah nodded barely. Are you safe where you are? The workshop was very quiet. The other students were working, but the room had the particular quality of people trying very hard to hear something they were pretending not to listen to. Noah didn't answer immediately. He looked at the wood. He looked at his hands. He looked at the wall on the far side of the room, at nothing in particular. And then he said in the quietest voice Cole had heard from him, I don't know how to answer that. Cole felt the truth of those words land in his chest like a stone dropped in still water. That's enough, Cole said. That's enough for right now. He didn't push. He didn't lay out what they knew about Wallace, or the furniture business, or the $90,000, or the notebook. He didn't say any of it. He just sat with the boy in the quiet of the workshop and let the weight of what Noah had just admitted, the first honest admission he'd probably made to a stranger in years, settle between them without forcing it into something it wasn't ready to be yet. When Cole stood up to leave, he reached into his shirt pocket and took out a card. Not a business card, a plain card with his name and his phone number written by hand. He put it on the edge of Noah's workbench. Noah looked at it but didn't touch it. You don't have to call, Cole said. But if you need to any time for any reason, you call that number. Okay? No answer. Cole walked to the door. He was almost through it when Noah said, from behind him, the eagle. The first one, Noah said, 9. I'd never carved anything before. He was looking at his hands, not at Cole. I thought it was terrible. I almost didn't leave it. It isn't terrible, Cole said. It's still on the shelf. Noah looked up, across the room, across the years, across everything between them. Something in his face, that braced, careful, perpetually defended face, moved. Slightly, just enough, eh? Noah said. Cole nodded. He walked out. In the truck, Marker said nothing for a full minute. He's going to call. I know, Cole said. How long? Was. Cole pulled out of the parking lot and thought about a boy alone in a shed, building beautiful things in the dark. A boy who had kept records. A boy who had spent 7 years leaving gifts for people he thought were safe. Because safety was something he could recognize from a distance, but had never been allowed to get close to. Not long, Cole said. He was right. Noah called 4 days later, at 11:30 at night, when the house was quiet and Richard Wallace was asleep, and the only sound was the wind outside and the particular silence of a boy who has finally decided that the cost of staying quiet is higher than the cost of being heard. He didn't say hello. He just said, I kept records, earns, everything, every table, every chair, every payment. I've got dates, amounts, names of buyers. 3 years of it. His voice was steady, but Cole could hear underneath it the effort that steadiness was costing him. If I give it to you, if I actually do this, what happens to me? Cole had thought about this moment. He'd thought about it carefully, the way he thought about everything that mattered. You don't get moved, Cole said. We make sure of that after you have options. Real ones. That's a promise. Silence. Long enough that Cole thought the boy might hang up. Then Noah said, okay, I'll show you the notebook. Noah had chosen the diner, not the Wallace property, not the school, the diner on 4th Street where Gail kept the coffee warm, and the corner booth had a clear view of both doors, and Noah had spent enough evenings there nursing a single cup that he knew every exit by instinct. He'd asked Cole to come alone. Cole had agreed without hesitation because he understood that this was Noah setting the terms for the first time in his life, and the worst thing Cole could do was take that from him. He arrived 5 minutes early. Noah was already there. The notebook was on the table in front of him, both hands resting on top of it. The way a person holds something they've been protecting for a long time and haven't decided yet whether they trust the person across from them enough to let go. Cole sat down. He didn't reach for the notebook. He ordered coffee from Gail, who refilled Noah's cup without being asked, and then disappeared with the particular tact of a woman who understood when a conversation needed space around it. How long have you been keeping it? Cole asked. Since I was 13, Noah said. 3 years. Why did you start? Noah looked at his hands on the notebook cover. Because I figured out that if I ever tried to tell someone what was happening and I didn't have proof, nobody would believe me over him. He said it without self-pity, without drama. Just fact. The kind of fact a person states when they've had years to make peace with how unfair it is. Richard is good at being believable. He's good at being the reasonable one in the room. He knew exactly what to say to social workers, exactly how to look, exactly which words made them leave satisfied. A pause. So I started writing things down. And Cole looked at the boy across the table, this 16-year-old who had without any guidance or support, stood that the system required documentation and had quietly begun building his own case because nobody else was going to build it for him. I see it, Cole asked. A beat. Then Noah slid the notebook across the table. It was a composition notebook, the black and white kind you could buy for $1 at any drugstore. The cover was soft from years of being carried in a jacket pocket. Cole opened it to the first page. The handwriting was small and precise and very neat, the handwriting of someone who had taught themselves to write carefully because every line mattered and space was limited. Each entry had a date, a description of the item made, the hours spent, the materials used, and then where Noah had been able to track it, the sale price Wallace received. Table oak, 4 chairs, 42 hours, sale, $4,800. Received nothing. Rocking chair, walnut, 61 hours. Awarded first place at the regional woodworking competition. Accepted by Richard Wallace. Received nothing. Case, cherry wood, 6 shelves with dovetail joints, 38 hours. Sale to interior designer in the city. Sale price unknown. Received nothing. Cole turned the pages slowly. Every page the same date. Description, hours, sale information. Noah had been able to discover, and that same brutal word at the end of every entry. Nothing. Nothing. 3 years of entries. Page after page of it. Cole closed the notebook. He didn't speak immediately because the thing sitting in his chest right now had too much force behind it to come out as words without becoming something else. And this was not the moment for something else. This was the moment for steadiness, for Noah. This is enough, Cole said finally. His voice came out level. He was grateful for that. This is more than enough. This is airtight. Tightened. It's enough to do what exactly? Richard has a lawyer. He has social worker relationships. He's going to say I made it up. He's going to say I'm a troubled kid with a grievance, and this is a fabrication, and he can say whatever he wants, Cole said. He can say it to the journalists and the community leaders and the former customers who bought furniture that you built. When they're all in the same room and this notebook is in front of them. He held Noah's gaze. Seats he has match your dates. The pieces he sold match your descriptions. The hours you logged match the complexity of the work. You didn't just keep records, Noah. You kept a paper trail that corroborates itself from every direction. Noah was quiet. He was looking at the notebook on the table between them. I didn't know if anyone would ever read it, he said. I know, Cole said. You wrote it anyway. Something moved across Noah's face. He picked up his coffee cup and held it in both hands and looked at the table, and Cole gave him the moment because it belonged to him. Then Noah looked up and said the question Cole had been waiting for, the question that was really the center of everything. Why does it matter to you? Actually, not the version of the answer you give people when you want them to cooperate. A real one. Cole considered this carefully. He owed the boy a real answer. When I was 12 years old, Cole said, I lived with a man who told me every day that I was lucky to have a roof over my head, and that I should be grateful, and that nobody else would take me. He paused. He meant it as a threat, and it worked for a long time because I was 12 and I believed him. Another pause. I spent a lot of years after that, wishing someone had walked into that room and told me he was wrong. I had options, that the situation I was in was not the permanent truth about my life. Cole looked at Noah directly. Nobody did, so I'm doing it for you. The diner was quiet around them. Gail was at the far end of the counter, deliberately occupied with something that didn't require her attention. Noah held Cole's gaze for a long time, long enough that it stopped being uncomfortable and became something else, a real look. The kind two people exchange when they're deciding whether to trust each other with something that matters. Okay, Noah said. He slid the notebook across the table. What do we do next? What they did next was move fast, because fast was the only way to do this before Wallace noticed something had shifted in Noah's behavior and started managing the situation the way he'd been managing it for 6 years quietly, efficiently, and completely to his own advantage. Cole called Marker from the diner parking lot while Noah sat inside, finishing his coffee. He described the notebook, the entries, the 3 years of documentation. Marker was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Tell me you made copies. Thing I'm doing. when I get back to the garage, Cole said. Because I have something to tell you too. A pause. Contact came through. Wallace has done this before. Cole stopped walking. What? Noah's not the first, Marker said. A boy before him. Different county, 8 years ago. Your kid, 15. Ended up in a Wallace placement for 14 months before the placement ended. The official reason on file is that it wasn't a good fit. Another pause. Contact found a complaint that was filed and then withdrawn. Handcraft work, theft of labor. The complaint was withdrawn because the boy aged out of the system and moved away, and nobody followed up. Cole stood in the parking lot and felt the cold air very sharply. He's done this before, Cole said, and walked away clean, Marker said, because the kid had no proof and no advocate and no one who was paying attention. Cole looked back through the diner window at Noah, who was looking at his coffee cup with both hands around it, alone at the table, 16 years old, and not yet understanding the full size of what he'd survived. Not this time, Cole said. Not this time, Marker agreed. The next 72 hours moved at a pace that Cole, normally associated with situations that were about to go sideways, the compressed high-attention speed of people who know that the window they have is smaller than they'd like. They made 3 copies of Noah's notebook, one for Cole, one with Marker, one with a woman named Sandra Reeves, who was a social worker in the county, and whom Marker had known for 11 years and trusted completely. Sandra Reeves received the copy at 8 in the morning on a Wednesday, read it cover to cover by 9:15, and called Marker at 9:20. "This is real," she said. Her voice was the voice of a professional who had seen things that had permanently removed her ability to be surprised, and yet was managing to sound shaken anyway. "This is thorough, it's consistent, and if what this boy wrote down can be corroborated against Wallace's financial records, this is not just a family services matter. This is potential fraud and labor exploitation of a minor." "Can we move quickly?" Marker asked. "I need to talk to him directly," Sandra said. "Can he come in voluntarily?" "Yes," Marker said. "When?" "Today," Sandra said. "This morning. Before Wallace has any reason to think something is happening." Noah was in school. Marker called Cole. Cole called Delaney. Within an hour, Noah was in Sandra Reeves's office, with a cup of tea he hadn't asked for but wrapped both hands around anyway, answering questions in that same careful, level voice while Sandra took notes, and her expression moved between professional neutrality and something considerably less neutral. Cole sat in the waiting room outside. He sat the way he'd sat in the garage on Christmas morning, completely still, completely alert, waiting. Denny appeared at 11 o'clock, pushing through the office door with 2 coffees and his coat still on. He handed one to Cole and sat down next to him without asking if Cole wanted company. "How long has he been in there?" Denny asked. 40 minutes. "He doing okay?" "He was steady when he went in," Cole said. "He'll be steady when he comes out." Denny nodded. "Coffee. Royce wants to go talk to Wallace," he said. "I told him no." "Good, he's not happy about it." "He doesn't have to be happy," Cole said. "He has to stay where he is." He nodded again. A pause. "Cole, this kid, he's been alone with this for 3 years. Keeping that notebook, carrying it around in his jacket, going home to that house every day, and acting like everything was normal." He stopped. "And do that because the alternative was giving up," Cole said. And he didn't give up. The door to Sandra's office opened at 11:50. Noah came out first. He looked the same as when he'd gone in, same steady posture, same carefully neutral face, but there was something different in his eyes. Not relief, exactly. More like the particular exhaustion of a person who has just put down something very heavy that they've been carrying for a very long time. Sandra Reeves came out behind him. She looked at Cole. "His account is detailed, consistent, and credible he was," she said. "I'm opening a formal case today. We need to keep this contained until we have the structure in place to act. Is there somewhere Noah can stay tonight that isn't the Wallace property?" Cole had thought about this. "Yes," he said. Noah looked at him. "My place," Cole said. "If that's okay with you." A silence. Noah processed it the way he processed everything carefully, looking for the angle, checking for the cost. Then he said, "You have a guest room?" "I have a couch," Cole said. "It's comfortable. I'll vouch for it." Something happened in Noah's face that might, in different circumstances, have been the beginning of a smile. It didn't quite get there, but it moved in that direction, and Cole counted that. "Okay," Noah said. Getting Noah's things out of the Wallace property without alerting Wallace was the kind of problem that required more coordination than it probably should have, And Cole handled it the way he handled complicated problems, by delegating the right parts to the right people and staying calm about the rest. He was. Stiles, who was young and looked the least threatening of any of them when he wanted to, drove to the school and waited in the parking lot. Sandra Reeves made a call to the school that meant Noah was released for a family services appointment. Noah met Stiles at his truck to the Wallace property during the window. When Wallace's own truck was gone, Royce had been sitting half a block down the road and confirmed by text when Wallace left. And Noah went inside and came out 11 minutes later with a bag that wasn't very full and a box that held his remaining tools. 11 minutes. Everything Noah that mattered fit in an 11-minute window. Miles drove him to Cole's place. He reported to Cole afterward that the whole drive there, Noah held the box of tools in his lap and didn't say a word. And when they pulled up to Cole's house, Noah sat in the truck for a moment and looked at the building with an expression Stiles couldn't quite describe. Not happiness, not sadness. Something that had both in it and sat between them. "He okay?" Cole asked. "I think so," Stiles said. I think he's trying to figure out what this is. Whether it's real." Cole understood that. He'd spent most of his own childhood trying to figure out the same thing. He found Noah in the kitchen, standing at the counter with the box of tools, having apparently organized them by size without being asked, which was the kind of thing a person did when they needed something to do with their hands and their head. "Hungry?" Cole asked. "I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine," Cole said. "I asked if you were hungry." A pause. "Yeah," Noah said. "Yeah, I'm hungry." Cole made eggs. It was 9 o'clock at night and eggs were what he had, and it didn't matter. They ate at the kitchen table without saying much, and the quiet between them was the kind that didn't need to be filled. The first quiet, maybe, that Noah had sat in for a long time, that didn't have threat behind it. After Noah looked at his plate and then at Cole and said, "When does it happen?" The formal part. Confrontation. "Soon," Cole said. "We're building something first." Kind of something." Cole set down his fork. "The kind that makes it impossible for Wallace to talk his way out," he said. "We're going to make this public. Not just a family services report that gets buried in a file public. People who bought your furniture, journalists, community leaders, all of it in one place, all of it at once. Noah absorbed this. He'll know I did it." "Yes," Cole said honestly. "And he'll say I'm lying." "He'll try," Cole said. "But the notebook corroborates against his own financial records. The customers who bought what you made will recognize your descriptions of the pieces. Delaney will speak to your skill level. Sandra Reeves will present the case file." He paused. "And there's one more thing." "What?" "He's done this before," Cole said. "There's a boy before you. 8 years ago. Complaint was filed and withdrawn." He held Noah's gaze. "We found him." Something moved across Noah's face, a complex, fast-moving thing that started with shock and moved through something darker and arrived somewhere that was not quite anger and not quite grief, and was earn. Cole thought, the specific emotion of learning that something terrible you experienced was not random, was not an accident, was a pattern that someone had refined across years and victims. "Found another kid," Noah said. His voice had changed, still level, but with something harder underneath it now. "He did," Cole said. "And that kid, the one from before, did he keep records?" Cole said. "But he's willing to make a statement. And his statement, added to your records, turns a pattern of exploitation into something that can't be dismissed as a misunderstanding." Noah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very controlled, the way it got when he was feeling something large and was not ready to let it out. "How old was he? The one before me?" 15, Cole said. "When it started." Noah looked at the table. "So he figured out that kids in the system were easier," he said. "Kids who had nobody who would push back hard enough. Kids who were used to being told they were lucky to have what they had." He stopped. "He was looking for a certain kind of kid." "Yes," Cole said. "He found the wrong one this time." Noah looked up. "You kept records," Cole said. "For 3 years, records, without anyone telling you to, without any guarantee that they'd ever matter, without anyone to help you or guide you. You did that alone." He looked at the boy steadily. "It's not luck. That's you. That's who you are." The kitchen was very quiet. Noah looked down at the table, his thumb against a small scar on the edge of his right hand, an old scar, the kind from years of tool work, and he breathed slowly. "I used to pretend," he said. "When I was in the shed working, I used to pretend that the things I was building were mine, that I was building them for a real reason, a real customer, someone who knew my name. He paused. I used to think about the people who were going to have them in their homes, whether they were happy, whether the chair was comfortable, whether the table was the right height. A silence. I just wanted someone to know I made it. Cole sat with that. He let it be what it was. People are going to know, he said finally. The charity event took 10 days to organize, which was 9 days faster than anyone outside of Cole's chapter would have believed possible. The morning was. Cole called in every connection he'd built over 20 years in Red Hollow. The tavern owner who owed him a favor, the journalist at the local paper who'd been looking for a story that mattered, the community center director who'd been quietly concerned about the Wallace household for 2 years and had never had enough information to act on it. He called the former customers personally, one by one, and described the pieces they'd bought and what they had in common. Every single one of them agreed to come. The most important call was to a woman named Carol Brennan, who had bought a dining table from Wallace's website 2 years ago, a 6-seater in reclaimed oak that she'd told her friends about for months afterward because the craftsmanship was unlike anything she'd seen in a furniture store. Cole described the table to her over the phone. The specific joinery, the way the grain ran across the top, the slight asymmetry in one of the legs that made it look hand-finished rather than machine-made, which she'd always loved. The silence on Carol's end. How do you know all that? She asked. I never described it in that much detail to anyone. The person who built it described it to me, Cole said. And he described it that way because he remembers every piece he's ever made. Another silence. Longer. He built it, Carol said. Not Wallace. No, Cole said. Not Wallace. How old is this person? Cole paused. 16, he said. He was 14 when he built your table. Was. The sound Carol Brennan made was very quiet and very specific, the sound of something in a person's understanding clicking sharply into a different position. I'll be there, she said. Whatever you need me to say. Wallace received an invitation to the event through the community center, a general charity gathering at the Hells Angels garage, framed as a holiday fundraiser and community appreciation event. The invitation mentioned that local craftsmen and artisans would be featured. It mentioned refreshments. It was warm and vague and gave him no reason to suspect anything at all. Cole had debated this, whether to invite Wallace directly. Parker had argued that you didn't need Wallace present to expose him. He was. The evidence spoke regardless of whether he was in the room. Cole had a different instinct. He wanted Wallace to walk in thinking he was safe. He wanted the man who had spent 6 years managing situations and controlling information to enter a room full of people who all knew the truth and watch his carefully maintained version of reality dissolve in real time with nowhere to go and no way to spin it fast enough. I'm to understand what it feels like, Marker said, when Cole explained this. To be the one who doesn't control the narrative, Cole said. Marker thought about it. Fair enough, he said. Noah was not told the full scope of what was being planned. He knew a public event was happening. He knew his story was going to come out. He knew Carol Brennan had been called, and a few others, and that Sandra Reeves would be there with the formal case documentation. He knew the journalist from the paper would be there. What he didn't know was how many people had said yes, or how comprehensively the room was going to be populated with people who knew exactly what Richard Wallace had done. Cole didn't tell him because he didn't want Noah to spend the 10 days leading up to it calculating the odds. He wanted Noah to walk into that room and feel, for the first time, what it was like to have people in his corner before the fight started. On the morning of the event, Cole knocked on the door of his own guest room. Noah had graduated from the couch to the guest room 2 days in, after Cole noticed the boy was waking up at 5 in the morning and trying to be quiet about it. Cole asked. Yeah, Noah said. Today's the day. Runs. A pause. I know. Cole opened the door. Noah was sitting on the edge of the bed with his hands between his knees, in the posture of someone who has been awake for a while, thinking about something they can't stop thinking about. Say it, Cole said. What if it doesn't work? Noah said. What if he comes in and talks his way around it, and everyone believes him, and I end up... Cole cut him off, not harshly. Look at me. The boy looked up. 12 people are going to be in that room who bought furniture that you built with your own hands, Cole said. People who can describe the pieces, who have them in their homes. Sandra Reeves is going to be there with a formal case file that took 10 days to build. Your teacher is going to be there. The man who filed that complaint 8 years ago is going to be there. He paused. And your notebook, that notebook you carried in your jacket for 3 years because you knew someday it might matter. That notebook is going to be on a table where anyone can read it. Noah was very still. Richard Wallace is going to walk into a room full of truth, Cole said. And the truth doesn't need him to cooperate. It's already there. Slowly, he looked at his hands. He turned them over, looked at the scars on his knuckles, the calluses on his palms, the old mark at the edge of his right thumb. He said quietly. Okay, Cole said. They were nearly out the door when Noah stopped. Cole turned. The boy was standing in the middle of the room looking at the box of tools on the dresser, the box he'd brought out of the Wallace property in 11 minutes and carried on his lap the whole drive over. He said, yeah, when this is over, he stopped. And it again. When this is over, wherever I end up, I want to keep making things. I want to actually get to keep what I make. He said it the way you say something you've never said out loud before, something that has been living inside you so long that hearing it in your own voice for the first time sounds strange and fragile and necessary. I just want that to be real. Cole looked at the boy for a moment. Pretty real, Cole said. We're just making it official. Noah picked up his jacket. He checked the inside pocket, the old habit, checking for the notebook, and then seemed to remember that the notebook was already where it needed to be, out in the world, doing what he'd always secretly hoped it might do. He followed Cole out. Neither of them knew yet what they would find when they walked into that garage. Neither of them knew about the car Richard Wallace had already parked down the street, and the look on his face as he walked toward the building with the easy confidence of a man who had never, in his adult life, walked into a room he couldn't manage. He was about to learn what that felt like. Richard Wallace arrived at 12 minutes past noon. Cole knew the exact moment because Royce was standing near the main door and sent a single text, one word. Here, and Cole felt the room shift the way rooms shift when the person everyone has been waiting for finally walks in, even when most of the people in the room were pretending not to wait. Wallace was 51 years old, medium height, the kind of man who had cultivated an appearance of quiet reasonableness so thoroughly and for so long that it had become his default expression. He wore a collared shirt. He had a friendly nod for the people near the door. He moved through the space with the ease of someone who had spent decades reading rooms and adjusting his presentation accordingly. And the first thing Cole registered, watching him from across the garage, was that Wallace genuinely did not believe anything was wrong. He thought this was a charity event. He thought he was safe. Cole had positioned Noah near the back of the room, between Marker and Stiles, deliberately not in the first line of sight from the door. He wanted Wallace to be fully inside, fully committed to being there, fully surrounded by the reality of who else was in that room before he understood what he'd walked into. Saw Wallace the moment he entered. Cole was watching Noah when it happened, and what he saw on the boy's face was not what he expected. He'd expected fear, the trained automatic fear response of someone who had spent 6 years learning that this particular man's awareness of you was dangerous. He'd expected Noah to pull back, to close down, to do the careful disappearing act he'd been performing his entire life. Instead, Noah went very still in a different way. Not the stillness of retreat, the stillness of someone who has finally, after a long time, decided to hold their ground. Marker noticed it too. He leaned slightly toward Noah without touching him and said, very quietly, "You good?" Noah said. His voice was steady. "Yeah, I'm good." Wallace had made it halfway across the room, shaking hands with someone Cole didn't recognize, when he finally looked up and saw Noah. The change in his face was subtle and fast, and Cole nearly missed it. A microsecond of recalculation, the expression of a man who has just encountered a variable he didn't anticipate and is immediately, smoothly beginning to manage it. His smile didn't drop, his posture didn't change, but something behind his eyes moved, a quick internal adjustment, like a compass needle finding a new north. He started toward Noah. Cole was faster. He stepped into Wallace's path at a natural angle, the way you do when you're not blocking someone, but simply happen to be between them and where they're going. He extended his hand. "Richard," he said, "glad you could make it." Wallace shook the hand. His grip was firm and practiced. "Cole Harrison," he said, and his voice had that quality of a man who has done his homework, the deliberate use of a full name to establish that he knows who he's dealing with. "I've heard of you. Good event you're putting together here." Cole said. He kept his hand in the shake just a half second longer than necessary before releasing. "We've got some people here I think you should meet. You know Carol Brennan." He turned slightly, and Carol Brennan stepped forward. She was in her early 50s, well-dressed, the kind of woman who chose her words carefully and meant every one of them. She looked at Wallace with an expression that was entirely pleasant on the surface and entirely something else underneath. "Mr. Wallace," she said, "I bought a dining table from you 2 years ago." Wallace said smoothly, "Beautiful piece. How is it held up?" "Wonderfully," Carol said. "I've had several people ask about it. Guests. You know what I always tell them?" She paused. "I tell them the craftsman was extraordinary, that you could feel the hours in it. Someone put real love into that table." She tilted her head slightly. "I always assumed that someone was you." A very small silence. Fast enough that most people wouldn't catch it. Wallace caught it. Cole could see that he caught the past tense. The assumed, and his recalibration engine was running at full speed. "Woodworking has always been a passion of mine," Wallace said. "Has it?" Carol said. "Not a question." Cole watched Wallace's eyes move briefly to Noah, still across the room, still standing steady between marker and styles. Then back to Carol. Then, for just a fraction of a second, around the room, taking inventory of who else was here, beginning to understand that this crowd was not random. Cole saw the exact moment. Wallace understood this was not a charity event. It moved across his face in under a second, and then it was gone, replaced by the smooth professional surface that had served him for decades. Cole had seen it, and more importantly, Wallace knew Cole had seen it. "Why don't we find somewhere to sit?" Cole said pleasantly. "There are some people here who've been looking forward to meeting you." He steered Wallace toward the center of the room, where Sandra Reeves was standing next to Frank Delaney, crossed, and the expression of a man who taught young people for a living and felt very specifically about what happened to them when they left his classroom. Sandra had a folder in her hands. She did not make a move to open it. "Not yet, Mr. Wallace," Sandra said. "I'm Sandra Reeves. I'm with Family Services, County Division." Something hardened in Wallace's face, just slightly. "I know who you are," he said. He looked between Sandra and Cole. "What exactly is this?" "This is a conversation," Cole said, "about a 16-year-old boy. Noah is my ward." Wallace said, and his voice shifted into a register. Cole recognized immediately the reasonable adult tone, the calibrated to imply that any suggestion of wrongdoing was an unfortunate misunderstanding. "I care deeply about his well-being. If there's been any concern raised, I can assure you," Mr. Wallace, Sandra said. She opened the folder. "I have a formal case file documenting 3 years of entries describing the creation of custom furniture pieces, the estimated hours of labor, and in many instances the sale prices received by your business, cross-referenced against your publicly registered revenue." She looked at him steadily. "The documentation is detailed, consistent, and independently corroborated." Wallace's jaw tightened. "That's a minor's claim," he said. "Now, without what?" Carol Brennan said, stepping forward. She took out her phone. On the screen was a photograph of her dining table. "I want you to describe this table to me, Mr. Wallace." The joinery, the specific grain pattern on the tabletop, the detail at the base of the legs. She held the phone out. "Take your time." Wallace looked at the photograph. He looked at Carol. He looked at Sandra's folder. He said nothing. "I can describe it," said a voice from behind Cole. Everyone turned. Noah had crossed the room. He was standing 6 feet from Richard Wallace for the first time in 10 days, and he was not doing the invisible thing, not making himself small. He was standing with his feet shoulder-width apart and his hands at his sides and his eyes on the man who had taken 6 years of his work and every cent of what it was worth. And his voice, when he spoke, was the steadiest Cole had heard it. "6-seater in reclaimed oak," Noah said. "Mortise and tenon joints, hand-cut. On the tabletop runs lengthwise with a slight curl. On the left third, I chose that board specifically because of that curl, because I knew it would catch the light differently depending on where you were sitting." He didn't look at Carol. He kept his eyes on Wallace. "There's a very slight asymmetry on the second leg from the right. I noticed it when I was finishing, and I considered correcting it, but I left it because it looked more honest that way." Handmade, a pause. "I spent 43 hours on that table. I was 14 years old. The room was profoundly quiet." Carol Brennan made a sound that was very soft and very specific, the sound of someone who has just had something confirmed that they needed to hear and had been afraid to know. Wallace looked at Noah. For the first time since he'd walked into the room, the smooth, professional surface showed a crack, not guilt, not remorse, Just the particular expression of a man who has just realized that the situation he's in is not one he can manage his way out of, and whose mind is moving very fast trying to find the exit. Noah, he said, and his voice dropped into something more private than he was, more familiar, the tone he used in the house when it was just the two of them. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We should talk about this privately, not, Noah said. Simple, flat, final. Wallace blinked. Noah said again, we're not doing this privately. We've been doing everything privately for 6 years. Done. Denny made a small sound from somewhere to Cole's left. Cole didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Wallace, watching the man recalibrate, watching him try a different door. You've clearly been influenced by people who don't have your best interests in mind, Wallace said, shifting to concern now, the caring guardian register, looking at Cole as though Cole were the problem. These men have a particular reputation, Noah, and I worry that you're Mr. Wallace, Frank Delaney said. He uncrossed his arms and stepped forward, and there was something in the way he moved that reminded Cole that Delaney had spent 22 years in a room full of teenagers and had a very specific tolerance for nonsense. I'm Noah's woodworking teacher. I'd like to ask you a question. Wallace looked at him. In the regional woodworking competition last April, Delaney said, you accepted a trophy for a rocking chair in Walnut Place. Judges called it the best piece in 12 years of the competition. He paused. Can you tell me the wood species of the secondary material used in the seat construction? Silence. The joinery technique on the armrests? Delaney continued. The finish applied to the back spindles? The total number of hours logged in the build? He waited. Any of them. Any detail at all. Wallace said nothing. His jaw was tight. His eyes were moving through the room the way a person's eyes move when they're looking for something they're not going to find. It was at this moment that a man Cole didn't know well stepped forward from the far edge of the group. He was around 24, with the particular bearing of someone who had lived through something difficult and had not entirely finished living through it. His name was James Colder, and he had driven 4 hours from the city that morning because Royce's contact had found him, and Marker had called him and explained what was happening. And James Colder had said yes before Marker finished his sentence. My name's James Colder, he said. He looked at Wallace. You remember me. It wasn't a question. And the way Wallace's face changed when he heard the name, a fast, terrible change, quickly controlled, but not quickly enough, confirmed everything. 8 years ago, James said, I was 15. I was in your house for 14 months. I built a bedroom set, 2 side tables, a bookcase, and a coffee table in that time. I filed a complaint when I left. It was withdrawn. He stopped. I withdrew it because I was alone, and I was scared, and I thought nobody would believe me. His voice was steady. I believe him. He pointed at Noah. The room held that moment the way rooms hold. The moments that change things, a collective stillness, a collective breath, the particular silence of a group of people all arriving at the same understanding at the same time. Richard Wallace looked around the room, at Sandra Reeves with her folder, at Carol Brennan with her photograph, at Frank Delaney with 22 years of experience in his eyes, at James Coulter, who had driven 4 hours to say 7 sentences, at the other former customers, 9 more of them, all holding in their memories descriptions of pieces that Noah could name in his sleep, at Royce and Denny and Stiles and Marker standing at various points around the room with the particular stillness of men who have already decided what they think and are waiting for everyone else to catch up, and at Cole Harrison, who was watching him with an expression that was not angry and not triumphant, and was simply, completely, done. And then Wallace looked at Noah. Noah looked back. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. Wallace's shoulders dropped half an inch. It was small. It was enough. I want a lawyer, Wallace said. His voice had lost the smooth professional register entirely. What was left was flat and stripped and sounded much more like the person underneath the performance. Sandra said, and I'll be filing a formal report with authorities this afternoon. In the meantime, Noah is not returning to your property. His placement is being transferred immediately, and pending investigation, you are not to contact him. She closed the folder. I'd recommend you call that lawyer now. Wallace looked at Noah one more time. Something moved in his face, not an apology. Cole didn't think it was an apology. Men like Wallace didn't arrive at apologies quickly or sincerely, but something that might have been the beginning of understanding what he'd actually done, who he'd actually done it to, and what it had cost. He left the room without speaking again. The door closed behind him. A moment, nobody in the garage spoke. The silence was different from any silence before it lighter. Somehow, as though something that had been pressing down on the air had lifted. Then Carol Brennan exhaled and said to nobody in particular, "Good Lord." And Denny laughed. It wasn't a comfortable laugh or a happy laugh, it was the laugh of a very large man releasing an enormous amount of tension that had built up over days, and it broke the stillness in the room, and several other people made sounds of their own that fell somewhere in the range between relief and disbelief. Cole didn't laugh. He turned to Noah. The boy had not moved from the spot where he'd been standing when he named every detail of Carol Brennan's dining table. He was looking at the door through which Wallace had left, and his expression was the most difficult thing Cole had seen on his face, yet not triumph, not relief, not the simple good feeling that should follow a victory. Something far more complicated. The expression of a person who has just watched something end that began before they had words for it, and who is not yet sure what they're supposed to feel in the space where that thing used to be. Cole walked over. He stood next to the boy. He didn't say anything immediately, because this wasn't a moment for words right away. He just stood there, close enough that Noah could feel he wasn't alone, far enough that he wasn't crowded. After a moment, Noah said, "Is it real? That it's done?" "Hard part is done," Cole said. "There's paperwork, process. Sandra will walk you through all of it." He paused. "Yes. The thing you've been carrying for 6 years, that specific weight. That's done." Noah breathed slowly. He looked at his hands. He turned them over the way he did when he needed something to anchor himself to the calluses, the small scars, the evidence of years of work. "I thought I'd feel different," he said. "How do you feel?" Long pause. "Tired," Noah said, and he stopped. Cole prompted quietly, "And like I'm in a room with a lot of people, and none of them are strangers," Noah said, "which has never happened to me before." Cole let that sit for a moment. James Coulter appeared at Noah's other side. He was quiet for a second, and then he put his hand out, and Noah looked at it, and then he shook it. A handshake between two people who had survived the same thing from different sides of time, and who had never met until today, and who understood each other completely without needing any further explanation. James said, "Yeah." Noah said, "I should have." A pause. "I'm glad you did." Noah nodded. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Carol Brennan found him 20 minutes later. She was holding a business card which she held out to him. "My husband and I have a home renovation plans for spring," she said. 3 rooms. "We need custom furniture built right by someone who knows what they're doing." She looked at him steadily. "I'll hire you properly, contracted, paid fairly, your name on the work." She pressed the card into his hand. "Think about it." Noah looked at the card. He looked at her. "You've seen my work," he said. "You have a piece of it in your house." "I know what I'm buying," Carol said simply. And she squeezed his hand just for a moment and walked away. Sandra Reeves spent the next hour walking Noah through the formal process, the investigation timeline, the placement transfer, the legal steps that would follow. She was thorough and clear and did not sugarcoat the parts that were going to take time, because Sandra Reeves did not believe in giving people false comfort about processes that were genuinely slow. But she said, "At the end of it, you have more support in this than most people do, going into this process. That matters." "I know," Noah said. He looked at the room around him, at the men in leather jackets who had organized all of this, who had found James Coulter and Carol Brennan and Frank Delaney and gotten them all in one room, who had made copies of his notebook and passed them to the right people. "I know." Marker came over at one point with coffee and handed it to Noah without asking if he wanted it, which was such a precisely Cole-like thing to do that, Noah almost smiled. "You did well today," Marker said. "I just told the truth," Noah said. "That's the hardest thing," Marker said, "especially when you've been told for years that it won't be enough." Looked at him. "Were you scared?" "When you were my age, you every day," Marker said without hesitation. "Every single day, I just got very good at not looking it." Noah absorbed that then. "Does it stop?" Marker thought about it honestly. "It gets quieter," he said. "You build things around it. Good things, until eventually the good things are louder." He nodded at the shelf above Cole's workbench, where the 7 gifts were still lined up in their order. "You've been building good things for years. You just couldn't keep them yet." Noah looked at the shelf, at the wooden eagle at one end and the guardian angel at the other, and all the years between them. Cole appeared at his shoulder. "There's one more thing," he said. Noah looked at him. Cole walked to the workbench. He picked up the wooden guardian angel, the last gift, the one that had started all of this, and he held it for a moment, looking at the imperfect wings, the careful detail, the hours visible in every line, and held it out to Noah. "This is yours," he said. Noah looked at the angel in Cole's hands. He shook his head slightly. "I made it for you." "I know you did," Cole said, "and I kept it. A year I kept it." He kept his hand extended. "I think it should go back to you. Not because I don't want it, because I want you to have it. That you made something this good and that it was worth something and that the person who received it never forgot it." He paused. "You can give it back to me someday. When you've made something that matters to you more." Noah looked at the angel for a long time. He reached out and took it. He held it in both hands. The way you hold something you've never expected to have back. The way you hold something that has traveled a long distance to return to you. Hands were not entirely steady. "Thank you," he said. His voice was very quiet. "You already said that," Cole said. 7 times in wood. Noah looked up, and this time the thing that moved across his face made it all the way. Halfway, not close, all the way. A real smile, the kind that came from somewhere deep and surprised and hadn't been out in the light in a long time. It changed his whole face. It made him look 16 in a way he hadn't looked before. Actually 16, actually young. Actually a boy who had the right to be 16 and young and surprised by something good. Cole saw it and felt the stone in his chest, the one that had been moving since Christmas morning, since 4:30 in the dark, finally roll completely out of the place where it had been sitting for as long as he could remember. Denny appeared at his elbow. "You okay?" he said quietly. "Yeah," Cole said. "You sure? Because you've got a look on your face that I've never seen in 20 years. Look." Denny considered. "Happy," he said. "Just regular happy. Nothing complicated about it." Cole watched Noah across the room, an angel in his hands. James Coulter saying something that made him nod. Business card. In his jacket pocket, Sandra Reeves's number in his phone, Delaney nearby with his arms uncrossed. For the first time all afternoon. Cole said, "That's what it is." Outside, Richard Wallace's car was already gone. The investigation Sandra had promised began that afternoon. The wheels of process moved at their bureaucratic pace, but they moved because the documentation was airtight, because the corroboration came from 12 independent sources, because James Coulter's statement added the pattern that turned an isolated case into something systemic. From the paper was already writing a story that would appear in print 4 days later under a headline that said everything in plain language that Wallace had spent years keeping complicated. And because a 16-year-old boy had spent 3 years writing everything down in a composition notebook that he carried in his jacket like a promise to himself that someday it would matter. Noah stayed at Cole's house through the investigation. He slept in the guest room and woke up early and reorganized his tools in the mornings and didn't say much over breakfast, which Cole matched without effort because he had always been comfortable with quiet that didn't need filling. He called Carol Brennan on the 4th day. "About the spring project," he said. "Careful, but not afraid. I'd like to talk about what you're looking for." Carol said she'd been hoping he'd call. She had a list of rooms and ideas and a genuine budget, and she spent 30 minutes on the phone with him talking through wood species and joinery and finish options, and Noah answered her with the authority of someone who knew exactly what he was talking and about, because he always had. After the call, he sat at Cole's kitchen table for a moment. Cole came in, read the room, earned 2 coffees, and sat down across from him. "Real client?" Cole asked. "First one who knows my name," Noah said. Cole set a mug in front of him. "How's it feel?" Noah wrapped both hands around the mug. He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything carefully, without rushing, giving it the space it deserved. "Like something starting," he said. "Like the first cut in a new piece of wood. Before you know what it's going to be, but you can feel that it's going to be something." Cole nodded. He drank his coffee. Outside, the January air was cold, and the town of Red Hollow was doing what small towns do in January, going quiet, pulling inward, waiting for something to change. Inside the garage, the 7 gifts were still on the shelf, Guardian Angel back in its place at the end of the line where Cole had returned it after the event, had given it back the next morning and said he wanted Cole to keep it after all, that it looked right there, that it belonged in the room where everything had started. The angel with the imperfect wings above the workbench in the garage on the edge of town. a boy's gratitude, held in wood, holding its place in the world. The investigation into Richard Wallace took 47 days. Cole knew this because he counted them, not intentionally, but the way you count things that matter, by the texture of each morning, by the particular weight of the days that had something in them versus the days that were just waiting. Noah was living at his place through all of it, and Cole had reorganized his life around that fact with a naturalness that surprised him, because Cole Harrison had lived alone for 11 years and had built that solitude into the architecture of his daily existence in ways he hadn't realized until someone else was occupying the guest room. Noah woke early. Cole had always woken early. They ate breakfast at the table without talking much, which suited both of them. Noah went to school. Cole went to the garage. In the evenings, sometimes Noah worked at the kitchen table with small pieces of wood and hand tools, making things that weren't commissions yet, just making the way some people sketch to think. Noah carved to think, and the small finished objects accumulated on the windowsill with the quiet consistency of a person who cannot stop creating even when there is no one asking them to. Cole didn't comment on the objects on the windowsill. He just moved around them. Sandra Reeves called with updates when there were updates. The case file had been submitted to the county. Wallace's financial records had been subpoenaed. Story had run in the local paper and been picked up by a regional outlet, and then by a larger one. And the thing that Cole had hoped would be impossible to ignore had become, in the span of 2 weeks, exactly that: a story that was too specific and too corroborated and too human to set aside. People called the garage. Cole hadn't expected that. People from Red Hollow, people from surrounding towns, people who had read the story and wanted to say something, but didn't know where else to direct it. Gail from the diner called to say she was glad. Carol Brennan's interior designer friend called to ask if Noah was available for a commission. Delaney called to say the school board wanted to name Noah as a featured alumni at the spring ceremony, which was premature since Noah hadn't graduated yet, but the intention was what it was. Cole relayed most of this to Noah in pieces, watching carefully each time for the boy's reaction, because Noah's reactions were not straightforward things. He processed information the way he processed wood, slowly, with attention to grain, testing the material before committing to the cut. The day the formal charges against Wallace were filed, Sandra Reeves called Cole first. He asked her to hold, walked down the hall, knocked on Noah's door. "It's official," Cole said. "Charges filed. Exploitation of a minor fraud, benefits of a guardianship misused. There'll be a process. There'll be a hearing. But it's in the system now." Noah sat on the edge of his bed. He had a small piece of wood in his hand. He almost always had a small piece of wood in his hand in the evenings, and he turned it over once, twice. Not looking at it, she was. "Looking at the wall," he said. Cole waited. "Okay," Noah said again, and this time it came out differently. Not the tight, braced okay of someone managing their expectations. Something that was finally loose enough to be real. He set the piece of wood on the bedside table. He put his face in his hands, not to cry, just to have somewhere for his face to be for a moment while everything recalibrated. Cole stood in the doorway. After a moment, Noah lowered his hands. His eyes were dry, but the skin around them was tight. "He's not getting out of it," he said. "No," Cole said. "He's actually not getting out of it this time." "No." Noah looked at the piece of wood on the table. He picked it up again. He held it without doing anything with it. "The boy before me," he said. "Yeah, he waited 8 years," Noah said. "He walked away at 15, and he waited 8 years, and he drove 4 hours, and he came and he said what he said." A pause. That's something. That's a real thing that a person did," Cole said. "I want to call him," Noah said. "I want to tell him I don't know, that I'm glad he came, that it mattered." "I'll get you his number," Cole said. He got the number. Noah called James Coulter that night, and Cole did not hear the conversation because Noah closed the door, which was right. Some things need privacy to be real. But Noah came out an hour later, and he looked like a person who has had a conversation that settled something, that put something in the right place that had been slightly off-center. "He's okay," Noah said. "James, he's doing okay. He's got a job in construction. He likes it." He paused. "He said he thinks about the furniture sometimes, the pieces he made. Wonders where they are now. Wonders if they're still good." Cole thought about the dining table in Carol Brennan's house, still standing, still carrying the weight of meals and families and years. "Things built right last," Cole said. "Yeah," Noah said. The next significant thing happened 22 days later, and Cole did not see it coming. He was in the garage on a Tuesday afternoon when Sandra Reeves arrived in person. She didn't call ahead, which meant what she had to say was the kind of thing she preferred to say face to face. Cole knew this about her by now. He made coffee. He waited. "We've been in contact with Noah's extended family," Sandra said. Cole looked at her. "He is extended family?" "A maternal aunt," Sandra said. Her name is Ruth Calloway. She lives in Oregon. She lost track of Noah when he entered the foster system 6 years ago. Tried to get custody at the time, but was denied circumstances, distance. There were complications. Sandra paused. When the story ran in the regional outlet, someone forwarded it to her. "She contacted us 4 days ago." Cole set down his coffee. "What does she want?" "To see him," Sandra said. "And if Noah is willing to pursue a relationship, potentially a placement, if the investigation concludes in the way we expect, and he needs a permanent solution." She looked at Cole steadily. She seemed genuine. "I did a preliminary check. She's clean. She has a stable home. She's been looking for him for 3 years. Raj was very quiet. "He doesn't know he has an aunt," Cole said. "Apparently not." Cole thought about this for a moment. He thought about what it meant, a living family member, blood, someone who had been looking, someone who existed on the other side of the wall of a loan that Noah had been living inside for as long as he could remember. "How do I tell him?" Cole said. He didn't mean it as a practical question. He meant it as the real thing underneath. How do you tell a boy who has spent his entire life believing he has nobody, that somebody has been looking for him? "What do you say? Where do you start?" Sandra looked at him. "Honestly," she said directly, "that's how you've done everything else with him, and it's worked." Cole drove home. He sat in his truck outside the house for a moment, which was a thing he found himself doing more often lately, taking a beat before he went in, preparing for conversations that required the best version of himself. Noah was at the kitchen table. He had his notebook out, not the old one, not the one with 3 years of Wallace's crimes, a new one, plain, that he'd bought himself 2 weeks ago. He was writing in it, and Cole had not asked what he wrote in it because Noah would say when he was ready. Sat down across from him. Noah looked up. He read Cole's face the way he read wood, quickly, accurately, without fuss. "Something happened," he said. "Sandra came by today," Cole said. Noah put down his pen. Cole told him directly, without softening the lead or building to it, because Sandra was right. Correctness was the only thing that had ever worked between them, because Noah had spent too many years receiving information wrapped in other people's management of how he should feel about it. He said, "Your mother had a sister. Her name is Ruth. She lives in Oregon. She tried to get custody 6 years ago and couldn't. She's been looking for you for 3 years. She saw the story and she called Sandra. She wants to see you." Noah did not react immediately. He sat very still, in the particular stillness that Cole now recognized as his most serious processing mode, the one where the inside of him was moving very fast and the outside of him showed nothing until he was ready. He said, "She tried to get custody 6 years ago," Cole said, "when you entered the system, and they said no. Circumstances. There were complications. Sandra didn't have all the details, but she tried," Noah said. He wasn't asking for confirmation. He was saying it out loud to hear how it sounded, trying the weight of it. Cole said. A silence. Noah looked at his new notebook on the table. He looked at his hands. He looked at the wall behind Cole's head. "She's been looking for 3 years, he said. 3 years. He stopped. Started again. "I've been right here." "Hard to find," Cole said. "The system doesn't always make it easy for people to find each other." Quiet for a long time. Cole waited. Outside, a car passed. Refrigerator made its small mechanical noise. Somewhere in the house, the heat kicked on. "I don't know her," Noah said finally. "I don't remember her. I was too young when." He stopped. "I don't know anything about her." "Then get to know her," Cole said simply. Noah looked at him. "If?" "Noah," Cole said. "What's the worst that happens? She's a person you've never met and she doesn't work out, and you're no worse off than you were before?" He held the boy's gaze. "And what's the best that happens?" Noah didn't answer that, but something moved in his eyes, something careful and private and fragile that Cole recognized as hope, the specific quality of hope that belongs to people who have been disappointed enough times to be afraid of it. Noah said, "Tell Sandra I'll talk to her." He called Ruth Calloway 3 days later. Cole sat in the living room while Noah made the call in the kitchen, close enough to be there if something went wrong, far enough to give the boy the space that was his. The call lasted 1 hour and 47 minutes. Cole knew this because he checked his watch at the start and again at the end, not out of impatience, but out of the particular attention of a man who understood that what was happening in the next room was significant and wanted to hold the weight of it appropriately. When Noah came out, his eyes were red at the edges, not from crying, or not entirely from crying, from the particular physical strain of holding a very large feeling in a very careful way for a very long time. Down on the couch, Cole sat nearby. She remembered me, Noah said. She had photos. She described them. She said she has a photo of me at a birthday party. I was 4, and I'm holding a piece of cake in both hands and looking at it like I can't decide whether to eat it or build something with it. He stopped. His voice was steady but thin. She's had that photo for 12 years. She said she looks at it sometimes. Cole said nothing. Noah said on the phone. She tried not to, but she did. He stopped. I didn't know what to do. Nobody has ever. I didn't know what to do when someone cried because they were glad I existed. Cole thought about that, about being 17 years old, because Noah had turned 17 2 weeks ago quietly, that Gail from the diner had insisted on making, and that Denny had eaten approximately a third of, and not knowing what to do when someone cried because they were glad you existed. He thought about what kind of years produce that particular gap in a person's experience. You don't have to do anything, Cole said. You just have to let it be real. Noah looked at him. She wants to come visit, he said. She wants to drive down from Oregon. She asked if that would be okay. Pause. Yeah, Noah said. Yeah, it is. He looked at his hands. I'm scared. Good, Cole said. Noah looked at him. Means it matters, Cole said. You only get scared about the things that matter. Calloway arrived on a Saturday morning in early March, 9 weeks after the garage event, 47 days after Wallace's charges were filed. She drove the whole way from Oregon rather than flying, which Cole later came to understand was a Ruth thing. She processed things in motion. She needed the miles under her. She needed to arrive having traveled. Cole drove Noah to the community center where Sandra had arranged for them to meet. He walked Noah to the door and stopped there. You're not coming in? Noah said. This one's yours, Cole said. Noah looked at him. Something passed between them, one of those looks that doesn't need words, because everything the words would say is already present in the air between two people who have come a long way together in a short time. I'll be right here, Cole said. When you come out. Noah nodded. He turned. He pushed through the door. Cole sat on the hood of his truck and waited. He wasn't cold, or he was cold but didn't care. He sat and looked at the sky and thought about the chain of events that had led to this moment: a 9-year-old boy on a highway, a charity ride that didn't know what it was doing, a wooden eagle with uneven wings, 7 years of darkness and closed doors and gifts left without names, a notebook carried in a jacket, conversation in a diner at 11:30 at night, an angel above a workbench, all of it leading here, to a boy walking through a door to meet the woman who had his photo on her wall. Cole was still sitting on the hood of his truck when the door opened an hour and 20 minutes later. Noah came out first, and behind him was a woman in her mid-40s with blonde hair that was darker than Noah's, who walked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was learning in real time to adjust to the lighter weight of not carrying it. Cole got off the truck. Ruth Calloway looked at him, and her expression was the expression of a person who knows they are meeting someone important and doesn't quite have the words for the category of importance. Cole, she said. Yes, ma'am. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, he told me about the gifts, about the garage. She stopped. She gathered herself. He told me that for 7 years, even when everything was terrible, he had this one thing, this one place where he felt like goodness existed in the world. She stopped again. That was you. That was your garage. That was your chapter. Her voice was steady, but just barely. I don't know how to thank someone for being the proof that kept my nephew alive. Cole didn't know what to say to that. He stood with it for a moment, the full weight of what she'd said, and he let it be the true thing it was instead of deflecting it. He did the work, Cole said finally. Every year he made something. Every year he came back. That was him. Ruth nodded. She understood. She was the kind of person who understood without needing it repeated. Noah was standing slightly to the side, watching this exchange with the careful attention of a person watching two worlds meet that had previously existed separately, trying to understand what that meant for the shape of things going forward. And looked at him. You okay? Yeah, Noah said. And then unexpectedly, she's funny. I didn't know she'd be funny. Laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her. You have my mother's timing, she said to Noah. She could land a line too. Noah looked at her with an expression that was new on his face. Slightly stunned, slightly delighted, slightly terrified, mention of a person encountering something they'd given up, expecting, and don't yet know how to receive. Mother, he said. That's my grandmother. Was your grandmother, Ruth said gently. She passed 8 years ago, but I have stories. She paused. I have a lot of stories. Noah was quiet, processing. He said finally. I want to hear them. The formal changes came through 6 weeks later. Richard Wallace's case resulted in a guilty plea on 2 of the 4 charges his lawyer had negotiated, as lawyers do. But the negotiation happened inside a structure of evidence so thorough that the 2 charges he accepted carried real consequence, real record, real mark. He was not going to do this to another child. The system for once had been given enough to work with that it actually worked. Noah's placement was officially transferred. The paperwork that moved through Sandra Reeves's office resolved him into Ruth Calloway's custody, and for him to complete his junior and senior years at a school near her home in Oregon, a plan that he had agreed to after a series of conversations with Ruth that he described to Cole as strange in a good way, like learning a language I didn't know I already half knew. The day the paperwork was finalized, Cole was in the garage when Noah walked in. The boy had his jacket on and the new notebook in his inside pocket. Cole had noticed that the new notebook had replaced the old habit, that Noah now wrote in it the way he used to carry the old one, close to his chest, something private and important, and he looked around the garage the way you look at a place that is about to become a memory, taking it in with different eyes than the ones you normally use. He looked at the shelf, all 7 gifts, still in order, the wooden eagle at one end, the guardian angel at the other. Between them, the years. Cole came over and stood beside him, looking at the same shelf. I was thinking, Noah said, yeah, when I go to Oregon, I want to start a real business. Actual business, contracts, invoices, my name on everything. He paused. Ruth has a barn, she said, I can use as a workshop. It needs work, but he stopped and almost smiled. I know how to fix things. You do, Cole said. Carol Brennan's commission is going to be the first one under my name, she agreed. He turned his head slightly toward Cole. I want to put it in writing, a contract, real professional paperwork. I know someone who can help with that, Cole said. A woman in town does small business contracts. I'll connect you. Not you. Noah looked back at the shelf. I want to make you something, he said. I go. Something for the garage. Not a gift left in the dark, an actual commissioned piece. Cole looked at him. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, Noah said. That's not why I'm doing it. Cole didn't argue. You don't argue with a craftsman about what they need to make. What do you have in mind? Cole asked. Noah had been thinking about this. Cole could see it in the way he answered, not searching for the idea, just articulating what was already there. Bench, Noah said. A real one. Built the right way, with drawers that actually work, and a vise that doesn't strip after 2 years, and wood that's seasoned properly so it doesn't warp. He looked at the existing workbench, the old battered thing that had held engines and coffee cups and 7 handmade gifts. This one's done. It's been done for years. You just haven't admitted it. Cole looked at the workbench. It's got character, he said. It's got rot, Noah said. Cole laughed. He hadn't expected to laugh right then, and it came out real, the kind of laugh that clears something out of you. Fair enough, he said. Noah built the workbench over the next 2 weeks, in the evenings and on weekends in the garage, while Cole and the others came and went around him. His tools in the box that had traveled from the Wallace property in 11 minutes, and set them up with the organized precision of someone who knows exactly where each thing belongs. He worked with a focus that was different from anything Cole had watched him do before, not the hidden, private focus of someone making things under someone else's control, but the open, self-directed focus of a person working on something that is entirely theirs to decide. The other guys watched him without making a production of it. Denny brought food and set it near him without commenting. Tucker came over once and looked at the joinery on the leg assembly for a long moment and said, "That's tight," in the tone that meant he'd been in enough garages to know what tight meant, and he was. And Noah said, "Thank you," and they both went back to what they were doing. Stiles sat on a nearby stool one evening and just watched for a while. 6, and he'd been with the chapter 3 years, and he had the self-awareness to know that what he was watching was something worth watching. How long did it take you to get that good? Stiles asked. Noah considered the question. I started when I was 7, he said. A piece of wood and a rusty chisel in a neighbor's shed. And I just started. I didn't know what I was doing. I just kept doing it. 7, Styles said. You were 7? I needed something to do with my hands, Noah said. When things were bad, working with my hands was the only thing that made the inside of my head quiet. Charles thought about that for a moment. What did you make? At 7? Nothing useful, Noah said. And this time the almost smile made it all the way. Shapes. Just getting the feel of it. He paused. Real thing I made was the eagle. The one on the shelf. Looked at the shelf. The wooden eagle at the beginning of the line. A 9-year-old's work, rough, earnest, full of hours. 9 when you made that, Styles said. 9, Noah confirmed. And you carried it to the garage in the dark on Christmas morning and left it and ran. Why didn't you knock? Why didn't you just come and give it to someone? Noah stopped working for a second. He looked at the chisel in his hand. Turned it over once. 'Cause I was 9, and you were all terrifying, he said. And because, he paused, because if I knocked and you opened the door and you didn't want it, that would have been something I couldn't take back. If I left it and you threw it away, I'd never have to know. Sat with that. But you came back, Styles said. Every year, Noah said. And every year the gift was still on the shelf when I looked through the window. So I knew. He went back to the chisel and the wood. You kept them. That was enough. For a long time, that was enough. The workbench was finished on a Thursday night. Noah set down his tools and stepped back and looked at it the way a craftsman looks at finished work critically at first. Through the list of every decision made, every joint, every surface, checking against the internal standard that only he could fully see. Then when the critical pass was done with something quieter, something that was allowed to be satisfied, Cole came and stood beside him. He ran his hand along the top surface. The wood was smooth and even and had the particular solidity of something built to last, not to look like it would last, but to actually hold the weight of decades without complaint, Cole said. It's good, Noah agreed. There was a moment between them. The real ones. The kind that don't get announced. Cole looked at the shelf above the new workbench. The 7 gifts still in order. Guardian angel at the end. Its imperfect wings catching the garage light exactly as they had since Christmas morning. Leave the shelf where it is? Noah asked. Leave the shelf exactly where it is, Cole said. Noah nodded. He picked up his tools and began putting them back in the box. One by one, in their order, the way he always did. Cole watched him and thought about a morning in December, a figure in the dark, a boy who ran. He thought about a note in careful handwriting, thank you for protecting people who never thanked you. He thought about the weight of 7 years of gifts and what it meant that someone had spent 7 years making something and leaving it in the dark because the light felt too dangerous to step into, he said. The boy looked up. I need to say something, Cole said, and I need you to let me say the whole thing before you say anything back. Put down the tool in his hand. He gave Cole his full attention. I didn't know you existed until Christmas morning, Cole said. I didn't know for 7 years that there was a kid who believed in us, who made things for us, who needed us to be the good guys and decided we were and held on to that. He paused. I spent 7 years on the other side of that door, not knowing. And I've thought about that a lot, about all the time that went by while you were out there, and we were in here and neither of us knew about the other. He stopped, gathered the next part carefully. But here's what I know. If I could go back and do it differently, if I could have known sooner who you were and what you were carrying, I would have, in a heartbeat, not because it would have made me feel good, because you deserve to have someone know sooner. You deserve not to be alone with it for that long. Noah was very still. You spent 7 years thanking us for something we didn't even know we did, Cole said. And then when we finally found out, you trusted us anyway. You trusted me, in a workshop, a room, when you had every reason in the world not to trust anyone. He held the boy's gaze. The bravest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of things. Raj was completely quiet. Noah looked at Cole for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His eyes were the old young eyes that Cole had seen for the first time in the full light of a school workshop, the eyes that carried more years than they should have had to. You didn't leave, Noah said. His voice was quiet, and it was the most essential thing he'd said in all the weeks of conversation between them. That's what I need you to know. Everyone else, everyone left or pushed me away or used me and moved on. You didn't leave. You came and found me and you didn't leave. He stopped. That's not something I take for granted. That's not something I can find the right words for. To find words, Cole said, you make things. Something broke open in Noah's face, all the way. Not managed, not careful, not braced. Fully, the way a door opens when someone finally has the right key. He back of his hand, briefly, against his mouth, and looked at the ceiling for a second and breathed. Cole let him have it. He stood nearby and let him have every second of it. When Noah looked back down, his eyes were wet, and he didn't try to fix that. Yeah, he said. His voice was rough and real. Yeah, I make things. Then make things, Cole said. Your whole life, make things. Write your name on them. Charge what they're worth. Let people know you made them. He paused. And when you teach someone else someday, because you will, you're going to teach someone else someday. Tell them what I'm telling you now. What are you telling me? Cole thought about the right words. He'd been turning this over for weeks. Since the diner, since the workshop, since the night Noah called at 11:30 and said I kept records. That the thing you build with your hands is proof that you were here, Cole said. That you existed, that you made something. And the right people, the people worth building, for they'll know your name, and they'll keep what you made, and they'll tell other people who made it. He looked at the shelf. That's not nothing. That's everything. Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at the workbench, his workbench, built with his hands and his hours and his skill, standing solid in the middle of the garage. He looked at the shelf above it, the 7 gifts in their order, an angel at the end. He looked back at Cole. Thank you, he said. Actually, thank you. Not in wood this time. I heard it both ways, Cole said. It was good both ways. Noah left for Oregon on a Saturday morning in April, had driven back down to get him, and they were going to make the trip together, 2 days on the road, stopping where they wanted, no particular rush. Had said that was how she did things, and Noah had said that sounded good, and Cole thought, watching them plan it, that they were going to be okay, that they were already in the early stages of becoming whatever they were going to be, which was something real and theirs. The chapter gathered at the garage to see him off. Not formally, Cole hadn't announced it as an occasion, but somehow all of them showed up, which was its own kind of announcement. Denny was there with coffee he'd brought from the diner without being asked. He was there in his usual quiet, standing near the door with his arms crossed and his eyes doing the thing they did. Royce was there, slightly uncomfortable with the emotional weight of the situation, which he managed by offering to look at Ruth's car for anything that needed checking before a long drive. Stiles was there, leaning against the wall, trying to look casual and not quite pulling it off. Noah went around to each of them. He shook Denny's hand, and Denny pulled him into a brief, bone-crushing hug and cleared his throat loudly afterward, as though something had happened to it. He said something to Marker that Cole didn't hear, and Marker listened and then nodded. Once. In that way, that meant he understood and agreed, and didn't need more words than that. He thanked Royce, who found something to say about his tires, and thereby avoided saying anything more complicated, which was fine, which was exactly right. Stopped at Stiles last. You asked me why I didn't knock, Noah said, instead of leaving the gifts in the dark. Stiles straightened. Yeah, I've been thinking about it, Noah said. And the real answer is I didn't knock, because I didn't think I was worth the door being opened. He looked at the younger man steadily. I was wrong about that. So if you ever know someone who's leaving things in the dark instead of knocking, he paused. Tell them to knock. Stiles looked at him. He was 26 years old, and he had not expected to be told something important this morning, and now he had been. And he didn't quite know what to do with it except say, okay, I will. Noah nodded. He picked up his bag. He came to Cole last. They stood together for a moment. Behind them, the workbench stood solid and permanent and new. Above it, the shelf held its 7 objects in their careful order, and the guardian angel at the end caught the morning light the same way it always had, those imperfect wings, and all those hours of care carved into 4 inches of wood. Noah looked at the angel. It belongs there, he said. Belongs there, Cole agreed. Noah held out his hand. Cole took it. They shook, and then Cole pulled the boy in, one arm around his shoulders, safe and firm and complete, the kind of embrace that says the thing that cannot be said in the handshake alone. Noah gripped the back of Cole's jacket for a second, just a second. Then he stepped back. I'm going to send you a piece, he said. I'm set up in Oregon. Something for the garage. Something that fits in here. I'll make room, Cole said. It might take a few months to get right. I've got time, Cole said. The coffee was. And I know what you're like when you're working on something that matters. Take what you need. Noah looked at him one last time, that old young face, those eyes that had seen too much too soon, and were now very slowly learning what it felt like to look ahead instead of over their shoulder. He picked up his bag. He walked to where Ruth was waiting, and she put her arm briefly around his shoulders, and he led her, and they walked to the car together. Cole stood in the garage doorway and watched the car pull out. He watched it until it reached the end of the block and turned the corner and was gone. He came up beside him. "Yeah," Cole said. "You sure?" Cole looked at the empty street. He thought about the morning in December when a boy had run down that same block in the dark. He thought about how long it had taken to slow him down, to turn him around, to get him to the point where he could walk towards something instead of away from it. He thought about what it cost to be the person who holds the door open long enough for someone else to decide whether to come through. "He's going to be extraordinary," Cole said. "He already is," Marker said, from somewhere behind them. Cole turned. The whole chapter was standing in the garage doorway, looking at the empty street, all of them together, leather jackets and coffee cups, and the particular silence of people who have done something that mattered and know it. Cole looked at the workbench, at the shelf above it, at the guardian angel with its imperfect wings. He thought about a note in careful handwriting, "Thank you for protecting people who never thanked you." He thought about how a 9-year-old boy had looked at a group of men the world was afraid of, and had decided, without anyone telling him to, that they were safe, that they were good, that they were worth crossing the dark for, year after year, with something made by hand and left without a name. He thought about how that boy had been right, not because the men in that garage were perfect, or soft, or easy to love, because when it counted, when a wooden eagle appeared at their door, when a note said, "Thank you" in careful handwriting, when a boy ran and needed someone to stop and not chase, they had been the thing he believed them to be. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes a frightened child decides, from a distance, in the dark, without proof, that you are worth believing in. And the only thing left in the world that matters is making sure they were right. Stayed above the workbench in the garage on the edge of Red Hollow, wings imperfect, wood worn smooth from years of being held and considered and set back in its place. Every man who walked into that garage looked at it. Some of them asked about it. Cole always told the story, all of it, from the beginning, from the wooden eagle in the dark on Christmas morning to the boy who turned around and walked toward the door instead of away from it. He told it because stories like this are the kind that need to be told, the kind that remind you what people are capable of when they decide to be. Noah Bennett's name went on every piece of furniture he built for the rest of his life. It was always enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.